Welcome to Sleep Narrations. You've arrived at a quiet place where nothing needs your attention and nothing asks you to stay awake. There is no story you must follow, no detail you need to remember. Everything here is meant to move slowly and gently fade. Tonight you can simply listen, or you can let the words pass by like distant sounds in the night. The narration will continue on its own at an unhurried pace, designed to soften your thoughts and ease your mind into rest. If you fall asleep, that is perfectly fine. The story does not mind being unfinished. So take a comfortable breath. Allow your body to settle and let the night do what it naturally does. Before the story begins, before any name is spoken, allow the day to slowly fade. There is nothing you need to carry with you, nothing that needs to be solved. The night has already taken care of that. Imagine a wide and quiet land, open plains stretching into the distance, low hills resting beneath a calm sky. The air is cool and still. Stars remain where they have always been, unconcerned with time. Here, there is no urgency. Life moves at the pace of the earth itself. Morning arrives when it is ready. Night returns without announcement. A small fire glows softly in the distance. Its light does not demand attention. It simply exists, steady and warm. People live close to the land. Their days are shaped by light, their nights by rest. Voices grow quiet as darkness settles. This is a world before haste, before history was written loudly. A world where lives unfolded slowly and meaning was found in observation. As you listen, you do not need to follow every word. The narration will continue on its own. Let your breathing slow. Let your thoughts loosen their grip. If sleep comes, it is welcome. In this quiet place, a life will soon begin. Not as a legend, but as a human story, shaped by land, by time, and by patience. And for now, it is enough to simply rest. The narration begins. Tonight, we tell the story of a life that would one day shape the fate of many lands, not through noise or haste, but through patience, observation, and a steady understanding of people. This is the story of Cyrus the Great. Before the crown, before the title of King of Kings, before his name was carried across deserts and cities, there was a beginning shaped by silence. Cyrus was born during a time when the Medes ruled the land, and their king was Astyages, a ruler experienced in power and attentive to signs of the future. One night, Astyages was troubled by a dream. It was a dream that did not fade with morning light. It stayed with him. It followed his thoughts, and those who heard it understood its meaning. The dream spoke of change, of something growing beyond control, of a future that would not remain as it was. When a child was born into his family, the meaning of the dream became clear. The child was his grandson. Astyages chose certainty over risk. He ordered that the child be taken away so that the future might remain unchanged. The task fell to Harpagus, a trusted man, close to the king and accustomed to difficult decisions. But Harpagus could not bring himself to end the life of a newborn. Instead, he carried the child far from the palace, beyond stone walls and guarded halls, and placed him in the care of a shepherd who lived among hills and open land. That same day, the shepherd's own child was born. For a brief moment, there was joy, but before the day came to an end, the newborn fell silent. Life left as quietly as it had arrived. The shepherd stood uncertain, holding loss in one hand and the king's command in the other. It was his wife who spoke. She looked at the child brought from the court, and then at the child they had lost. And in that quiet moment, she understood what could be done. Together, they chose to let the king's order end there. The child from the palace would live, and the child born to them would be returned gently to the earth. The shepherd carried the lifeless infant to the place he had been told to leave the king's grandson. The order was fulfilled, and yet it was not. Cyrus remained. He was raised as the shepherd's son, far from power, far from privilege, and close to the rhythms of ordinary life. He learned the weight of work, the value of cooperation, and the patience of the land. The hills became his teachers, the people around him, his first community, and in those quiet beginnings, a life began to take shape, unseen by the world, but already moving toward it. The years passed quietly. Cyrus grew among the children of the hills, unaware of the path that lay ahead. He rose with the sun, worked alongside others, and learned the small rhythms that shape ordinary lives. He did not grow up surrounded by command. There were no orders waiting to be given, no titles waiting to be claimed. And yet, even in these simple surroundings, something about him stood out. When children gathered to play, they naturally looked to Cyrus, not because he demanded attention, but because he understood how to bring order without force. If a task needed to be shared, he divided it fairly. If a disagreement arose, he listened before speaking, and when a decision was made, others accepted it without resistance. There was calm in the way he spoke, a steadiness in the way he acted. Even adults noticed. The shepherd watched him closely. He saw how people trusted the boy's judgment, how others felt comfortable following his lead. As Cyrus grew older, these qualities became more apparent. He was given responsibility early, not because of strength, but because of reliability. He did not rush. He did not boast. He observed, and and then acted. It was during these years that his behavior began to draw attention beyond the hills. Stories travel easily in small communities, quietly, and without intention. Word began to move outward. Eventually, those stories reached places of power. At the court of Astyages, the king listened. What he heard unsettled him. A boy of unusual presence, a child who led without command, a young life unfolding beyond expectation. The memory of the dream returned. Cyrus was summoned, taken from the life he had known. He was brought before the king into a world of stone, silence, and watchful eyes. Astyages looked closely at the boy. He saw confidence without arrogance, calm without hesitation, and something familiar, something he could not ignore. The truth did not remain hidden for long. The child before him was not the shepherd's son. He was his grandson. Anger followed, not at the boy, but at the disobedience that had allowed him to live. Punishment was given, the past was settled, but the future, once again, stood open. Cyrus did not return to the hills. From that moment, his life moved into a new world, one shaped by power, observation, and careful silence. And yet, the lessons of the hills did not leave him. They followed him quietly into the halls of the court. Life at the court was unlike anything Cyrus had known. The open land was replaced by stone halls. Simple voices were replaced by careful speech. Every movement carried meaning. Every silence carried weight. Here, power did not need to raise its voice. It waited, confident that it would be heard. Cyrus observed. He watched how Astyages ruled, how decisions were delayed, considered, and delivered without haste. He learned that authority was not always force, but presence. At the court, he was educated in the customs of rule. He learned how people were governed, how alliances were formed, and how patience often shaped outcomes more than strength. Cyrus listened more than he spoke. When others sought attention, he remained still. When opinions were offered freely, he measured his words carefully. Those around him noticed. He did not behave like a guest, nor like a prisoner. He behaved as someone who belonged. Servants trusted him. Nobles respected him, not because of his lineage, but because of the calm certainty he carried with him. Astyages watched closely. The boy who had once been hidden among shepherds now moved confidently through the halls of power. There was no fear in him, no resentment, only understanding. Cyrus learned from what he saw. He noticed how pride narrowed judgment, how fear weakened command, and how rulers who listened often ruled longer than those who demanded. As years passed, his presence became familiar. Responsibilities followed, small at first, messages to be delivered, discussions to observe, moments where judgment mattered. Each time, Cyrus responded without urgency. He did not rush to prove himself. He allowed trust to grow naturally. The court shaped him, but it did not change him. From the hills, He had learned the lives of ordinary people. From the court, he learned the weight of decision. Between these two worlds, his understanding deepened. When the time came for Cyrus to leave the court and return to the Persians, he did not leave as a boy shaped by chance. He left as someone who had seen power from within and understood its cost. The quiet lessons of the court settled within him, and as he stepped back toward the wider world, the foundation of his future leadership was already in place. When Cyrus returned to the Persian lands, he did not return with noise. He returned with a quiet steadiness that people could feel. He had lived among ordinary families, learned the weight of daily work, and later walked through the halls of the Median court, where every word was measured and every silence meant something. Now he stood between two worlds, the open land and the stone palace, and he understood both. Among the Persians, leadership was not distant. A leader could be approached, questioned, watched. Respect was earned slowly by consistency, not by spectacle. Cyrus did not arrive declaring greatness. He arrived listening. He spent time among people whose hands were rough from labor, whose lives were shaped by seasons and hardship. He noticed where burdens gathered. He learned what kind of order people needed to breathe more freely. And as days passed, something natural began to happen. When disagreements rose, Cyrus calmed them. When choices had to be made, he weighed them without haste. When others argued to be heard, he spoke simply, then stepped back. Trust formed around him the way a fire gathers warmth, not suddenly, but steadily. In time, those who had influence among the Persians began to look to him as a center of balance, not because he forced them, but because his presence made sense. Cyrus accepted responsibility in the same way he had accepted it as a boy, without pride, without fear. He understood that a people do not follow a man forever just because he is strong. They follow because they believe he will not humiliate them, because they believe he will be fair when it matters. So when the moment came to move beyond the small boundaries of Persian life, Cyrus did not speak of conquest. He spoke of stability, of ending uncertainty, of building a rule that could hold many kinds of people without crushing them. He gathered allies carefully. He chose patience over haste, and step by step, the quiet life widened. The world around him did not change in a single night. It changed in a series of calm decisions. And Cyrus, still young, still observing, began to carry a larger fate, not like a burden that made him loud, but like a responsibility held with steady hands. Once the path opened, it opened in more than one direction. To the west lay rich lands, old cities, and rulers who believed their walls and gold were enough to keep the world the same. One of those rulers was Cyrus of Lydia, a king whose name was spoken with the quiet awe that wealth can create. Cyrus did not rush toward him like a storm. He moved, as he always did, patiently. There were marches across wide distances, days measured by dust and sky, nights where fires burned low and men spoke softly. The world felt large, and Cyrus learned what it meant to be responsible for thousands of lives moving under one command. When the moment came to face Lydia, it was not treated as a game. It was treated as a turning point. Cyrus understood something many rulers forget. When a city falls, you can rule it through fear for a short time, but you can rule it through order for much longer. And when Lydia's power ended, Cyrus did not make the ending cruel. He did not turn victory into humiliation. Even enemies were handled with a kind of careful restraint, as if he already understood that today's defeated might become tomorrow's necessary ally. News traveled. Some cities resisted. Others opened their gates, not because Cyrus was merely strong, but because people heard something unusual in his approach. A ruler who preferred stability to chaos. A ruler who could hold power without losing his balance. With each new land, Cyrus faced the same choice: to crush and terrify, or to organize and steady. Again and again, he chose steadiness. He allowed local life to continue. He respected temples and customs. He focused on keeping roads safe, trade possible, and daily living predictable. This was not softness. It was intelligence. It was a kind of strength that did not need shouting. And as the West quieted under his expanding rule, another name waited in the distance, a name that carried ancient weight: Babylon, a city older than memory felt, a city of temples and stories, a city that many believed could not be taken without ruin. Cyrus listened. He waited. He prepared. And then, with the same calm patience that had shaped his childhood, he turned his attention toward the greatest gate of them all. Babylon was not just a city. It was a world within walls, streets that had carried generations, temples that held the breath of ancient prayers, a place where the past felt alive, heavy, and watchful. Many expected Cyrus to arrive like a destroyer, because that is what power often looks like when it is afraid. But Cyrus did not come afraid. He came prepared, calm, and deliberate, as if he understood that Babylon did not need to be broken. It needed to be held. And so the city opened, not in a moment of burning chaos, but in a moment that history would remember as strangely controlled. Order was maintained. Life was not turned upside down. The temples were not treated as enemies. People were allowed to breathe. This mattered more than most rulers ever understand, because when a city believes it will be humiliated, it fights with desperation. But when a city believes it might be respected, it becomes quieter, more willing to accept a new order. Cyrus entered Babylon with a steady hand. He presented himself not as a man who had come to erase, but as a man who had come to restore balance. He spoke in the language of relief, of ending unnecessary suffering, of returning sacred things to their places. Babylon had seen rulers who demanded worship, rulers who punished difference, rulers who made fear the foundation of peace. Cyrus chose another kind of foundation. He allowed the city's life to continue. He protected the ordinary rhythms people depend on: markets, homes, the simple predictability of tomorrow. And then, in the quiet way that important things are sometimes done, a message was set down in clay. Not a poem, not a song, not a speech shouted to the sky, but a record, a statement of rule, of intention, of policy, a declaration that the new power would not be built on needless cruelty. This clay record would come to be known as the Cyrus cylinder, and in the stillness of Babylon's long nights, with lamps glowing softly in distant windows, Cyrus's name settled into history, not only as a conqueror of walls, but as a ruler who understood that the hardest thing to conquer is not a city, but the fear inside the people who live there. Cyrus did not rule Babylon as a man intoxicated by victory. He ruled it as a man who understood the delicate work of holding many worlds inside one empire. In those days, empires often moved people like objects. They uprooted families, they emptied cities, they turned exile into a tool of control. But Cyrus chose a quieter approach. He allowed displaced communities to return to their homelands. He allowed sacred objects to be returned to temples. He understood that faith and identity are not things you can crush without creating endless unrest. Among the peoples affected by exile were the Judeans, who had been carried away from their land. Under Cyrus's rule, they were permitted to return, and the rebuilding of their temple was allowed to begin. For many, this was not politics. It was the return of breath, the return of home, the return of a life that had been paused for too long. And in this, Cyrus became remembered in a particular way, not as a perfect man, because no ruler is, but as a ruler whose strength did not require humiliation, whose authority did not depend on breaking the spirit of others. He had learned long ago, among shepherds and hills, that people do not live by fear alone. They live by meaning, by belonging, by the simple hope that tomorrow will not be taken from them. Cyrus carried that understanding into power. He built structures that could last. He placed trust where trust could grow. He held the empire together not only by force, but by a kind of careful respect. And when his life moved toward its final chapter, the empire did not collapse into immediate darkness. What remained was a shape, a memory, a model, a king who ruled widely, and yet is remembered most clearly for the moments when he chose restraint. And now, as the night deepens, you do not need to hold every detail. It is enough to remember the feeling that once, long ago, a ruler walked into one of the world's greatest cities, and instead of turning the night into fire, he let it remain quiet, and in that quiet, history remembered him.